everyone. Excited to have you join us. Today we have Deborah presenting and walking us through her expertise on how to build a brand that customers trust and investors understand. We got a lot packed in. She's also joining us next week, so I'm going to quickly hand it over, but excited for you guys all to be here. Be sure to continue to put questions in the chat. If we don't get them today, we'll get to them next week. But with that, welcome, Deborah. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Kennedy, thank you so much for having me, and happy Friday to everybody. We're looking forward to an uplifting half an hour together. And as Kennedy mentioned, I'm going to be with you again next week. So hopefully you enjoy this one because we're going to roll it right over. There is going to be a lot packed into today. And so I encourage you to communicate with me if you have additional questions, and we can roll some of that content in next week. This week is about brand, and next week we're going to showcase how to activate that brand and take you from invisible to visible. But today it's all about branding. Just to give you a very quick background on me, I am Deborah Rizzi. I'm the president of Rizco. We are a brand-led marketing agency where everything is designed to matter. 26 years in business, woman-owned business here in New Jersey, supporting brands throughout the state that have reach that is not only within the state, but regionally, nationally, and sometimes even globally. So I'm going to jump in, present, and jump into the content that we have so that we can maximize our time here. Okay. So as Kennedy mentioned, today we're talking about going beyond the logo. We're building a brand that customers can trust and investors understand. We always like to, here at Rizco, we have a program about grow, and that's our own cultural and professional development plan. But we like to use this acronym as well when we're presenting, because we want you to get noticed, raise your value, organize your resources, and win business and people. So for you today, I challenge you, please identify one change that you want to make in the next 30 days and own it. I always like to start with a little bit of a story. And so I'm going to pull up this image here, and this should be familiar to most of us. You know, you see somebody typically on a road or a piece of property, and, you know, they're surveying. We as business owners, founders, you typically, when you're developing a new brand, a product, whatever it may be, we get so excited that we just want to jump in, and it's all right. I want to develop that logo. And that's typically what we hear from the client is, I need a logo. And the truth is that the foundation for any brand is to survey your land first. So if you think about it, if you buy a piece of property, you don't just jump in and start building on it. You have somebody come out and survey it. What can you build? What are the regulations? Are there any risks? Are there any pitfalls? You know, how can you differentiate that property from everybody else? So we like to use this analogy so that you take that pause, you survey the land, you use research so that as you build your organization, you're building it on a really strong foundation that has that actually has statistics and analytics backing it, so that you know that it's going to be strong moving forward. Because we all know, okay, if you build that house and it's not built properly, then you have to go through renovations, it falls down, and it becomes a lot more costly. It is the same thing for your business as well. Brand is always the foundation. So I have objectives for today's session. I always like to give you a little bit of the state of the industry, some good statistics to walk away with, why brand is far more than a logo, the biggest positioning mistakes that startups make, creating a brand that customers understand, and how strong brands improve fundraising, hiring, and sales in the long run. So state of the industry, I'd like to give you some facts here. First of all, is companies that maintain consistent branding across all of their platforms can see revenue increases of up to 23%. So that's a big difference as you're looking at your bottom line. Secondly, as you're developing the brand, launching the brand, this number, you know, could be questioned, especially with AI and the amount of different multiple platforms that people are using. But you typically want to have 5 to 12 touch points to create that warm lead. And so consistency counts in your brand. And then the last one is 81% of consumers say that they need to be able to trust a brand that they buy from. So that word trust is really big in this process. And this process that we're going to talk about is what instills that trust, which creates value on the back end. So brand is more than a logo. So the branding myth is, that branding is not just a logo. And I always say, I try to make this real for a client, is your brand is really what people say about you when you leave the room. It's not just how they see you and the way that you look, but it's the way that you talk about yourself. What makes you different? What makes you memorable? Why do they want to engage with you again? So it's the same thing with your brand. It's that perception, trust, reputation, experience, and promise. And that recognition is what creates that equity in your brand. And so I love using this visual because you look at this, and I would assume that not at least nine out of 10 of you would know exactly what this is, and it is Nike. Yes, the brand reputation, you see that logo. So yes, the logo is a part of that, but when you see this, you recognize it. You have a feeling. You do think about shoes, even though the brand has evolved. You might even envision like what type of athlete is wearing that product and engages with that product. So it is years of recognition, consistency, that they are so well known that they don't even have to put their name or a URL on this ad. You just know by looking at it that it is Nike. So why is a logo, why isn't it just logo, just a part of the brand? So branding behaves like an intangible economic driver. And this is where the financial side of things goes. As startups, this is usually the area where we want to cheat the process a little bit. It's like, okay, can I just develop a logo for $50? And it's the verbal and the visual and that key differentiation of how you talk about yourself and present yourself that creates that equity. So the financial reality becomes that most people treat it like an expense, whereas it truly is an investment and it works like an asset on the back end. So from the accounting standpoint, you see it as an expense on your income statement. It's not recorded as an internal asset, but then you look at it on the back end and the value that it provides, it increases your pricing power. It lowers your client acquisition costs. It's strengthening your client loyalty and retention. And in the long run, it's the EBITDA. You're trying to increase your EBITDA and that key differentiation so that you're adding value and being able to present that value even up front as you're trying to get investors. So the three biggest mistakes that startups typically are making are, number one, you're trying to serve everyone. It's really important for you to hone in, and you might not know exactly who your target market is. You're going to have an idea of it, but maybe you go out of the gate establishing 2 or 3 target markets, and then you split test them, and then you hone it as you go on. But being everything to everyone is one of the first challenges and mistakes that are made. Number 2 is talking about features instead of outcomes. It's red. Well, why is it red? Does red make it perform differently? Is it more noticeable? Really talking about the why behind you made that item red per se. And then once you actually launch that product or that service, making sure you're measuring so that you can repeat back to your customer base what the value is, what the impact is, and being able to give that measurable in your messaging. And the third is looking and sounding like everybody else. And we'll dig into that a little bit more. So creating a brand that customers understand, and this is a challenge. So the brand challenge starts with, and as I just mentioned, is sounding like everybody else. And these are some of the most overused words: premier, leading, innovative. I mean, let's add world-class in there too. You hear these words over and over again. So it is really important for you to figure out what your messaging is, because pricing becomes a factor in this. If you sound the same as everybody else, then somebody is not going to value you on the higher scale. They're going to say, all right, I want the cheaper option, or can you bring your price down? So this is where you want to make sure that you're creating a message that is differentiated from everybody else. Strong brands create preference. And so I talk about buyers here. Buyers can be the consumer that's purchasing from you, but then it's also the buyers as far as your investors and even acquisition down the road. And so you need to ask these questions. And if you haven't answered them yet, I would encourage you, grab a piece of paper or open up a note on your computer now. Why you? What makes you different? Why does your expertise matter versus somebody else? Why should they trust you? And once again, when the differentiation is unclear, things become price driven. And, I can relate to this 100%. Like sometimes you have a need, you go to Amazon, you're like, okay, I need what I need. And for instance, my daughter's turning 21 next week and I need shot glasses for her. I know I'm only going to use that once. And so you go to Amazon, you find something, you look at the price. Is it cute? Can I get it in time? And, that is a decision based upon, all right, I need it now. It's price driven. You make the purchase and it shows up. It changes though. What if she was getting married? And Ken and I were talking about this as she's newly engaged. If I was buying shot glasses and it was more so for a wedding and I knew that she was going to use them for a long-term occasions, you start asking different questions of, is the quality there? Is it durable? Is it going to last? Is it, made with the right type of materials? Maybe I'll decide to buy from Tiffany, a brand that I know and I trust, and I'm willing to pay more because I know it's well made, and also it's going to have that feeling of something that's special. So I hope that's a good example for you to resonate with how you clearly differentiate yourself and how price can be differentiated through that value of your brand. So how do we do this? And this is the process that we use when we're developing brands on behalf of our clients. First is to do research. We touched on surveying the land. You want to execute on that plan. You want to measure it and you want to adjust it. So yes, you would like to not be rebranding every single year. So you go through this process, but it doesn't mean as your brand evolves that you're not going to make tweaks to that brand. Risco has been around for 26 years. I would say that we have repositioned, it's been about four times. And even just in the past few months with AI coming into the marketplace, we're looking for another repositioning. So as you go through this, it's not a set and forget it, but going through the process allows you to do that research to make sure that the brand has a strong foundation so that you're not reinventing yourself over and over again, which creates that trust and stability when your customers come back to you. So how do we do this? And this is typically done in 3 different tiers, and it depends upon the maturity of your business. So if you're really just starting out, looking at your competition is the first thing that you're really going to want to do. If you have a unique product that nobody else has, find something else that might be competing for you in that space. And what do? You look at what is the positioning that they have? What messaging are they using? What words are they using? What is their visual brand like? Are they, what colors? A lot of times we stack up clients against themselves, and especially in the healthcare space, there are a lot of blues that are used. And in that case, color actually has theory too. So typically in healthcare, you're not using black because that resembles death. You're not using red because that's usually emergency. It really depends upon the brand and what you are trying to develop there. But you do want to look at your competition because you want to be able to shift yourself and differentiate yourself as needed. What is their web and digital presence? Adding on to this, AI has come into play too. So you need to look at the content and the other additional searches, even on top of SEO, to see how they're communicating and what questions are coming up about those brands. What are the service offerings, the thought leadership, your reputation and your social presence, and then your audience connection. A lot of this like the foundational work can be done using AI, digging in and making sure that you know how to prompt on a higher level to really ensure that the messaging that you're coming out with is relevant to the target market and the area where you're in. It's also very beneficial if you don't know who your competition is. Use AI and say, okay, competitors near me, who else is in my space, or who nationally is doing what I'm doing, and find that brand that you might want to emulate in the future. If you're an established brand or even just a newer brand, and you have employees, remember that your employees are an extension of your brand. So if you are making a shift, it is always good to engage them in that shift because they're experiencing it with you. And if you are going to be rebranding, usually they're giving you insights that are very valuable, but also too, if you ask their opinion on something when that shift comes in, they are more susceptible to embrace that change because they've been part of the process. So we're typically asking these questions internally of staff members or key constituents. What are the first 3 phrases that come to mind? What's your elevator pitch? This is super important because you want to make sure that everybody's speaking the same language. Even just your brand name. Sometimes there are company names that are longer, and some of the staff says the full name, they say part of the name, or they use an acronym. You want to make sure that there's consistency there. And by asking those questions, you're able to pick up and see where those inconsistencies are. What are the key differentiators? Who are those competitors? If you could have one marketing tool tomorrow that would help to drive sales. And then from a sales perspective, where are we experiencing the most success? So that through research, you're not only developing the visual and the verbal, you now have a plan of where to execute on that. So you're not throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. You're able to hone in very tightly of, this is my target market, this is where they are, this is how I reach them, and this is how I should be communicating. When you're an established brand, you typically are taking the same internal research process and doing it with your external constituents as well, which include your client base. How do you keep your competitive edge? And I always like to use this one. So Rook Coffee is big in our area and is growing throughout New Jersey. The first location, which is very close to me, right down the block, you have Dunkin' Donuts. Across the street, you have Starbucks. And 1 block away, you have another boutique coffee shop. So in this case, it's really important to identify your target market, stay relevant, and hone that target again. And so where you see some other brands, some other coffee brands per se, are adding food and juices and all these other elements, Rook stay true to themselves. We do coffee. We do it really, really well. And so when you have a crowded market space that you're in, it's important to look at those key competitors on a very tight basis. And this is an example of how you roll out that brand. And this is how Rizco looks. And don't forget, you want that consistency across everything. And we remember that it's web and social, but then think about that small element, like your own personal LinkedIn page. You have a banner, a billboard, pretty much that live area that is above your photo on your LinkedIn page. It should be your brand. It should be your messaging. That is your free billboard. That consistency should go all the way through. Another piece that's very important for AI searches right now is your Google business page. So making sure that consistency in visuals and verbal is carried all the way across. And then it goes down to your employees as well. Do they look like the brand? Do they speak like the brand? Are things consistent all the way across? So strong brands, they improve hiring, fundraising, and sales. and this is where we're getting more into that financial side of things, investors, what are they actually paying for? What are they investing in? And it's not just revenue. They're trying to buy that durability. And here's a line list of the things that they are looking at. And so, of course, it's the revenue and the product mix and the key person dependency, making sure that you don't have turnover. What's your talent pipeline, your market positioning? But then you see that brand strength. So brand is that asset that we talked about that gets reviewed. I can say as a key example, and this is a more mature aspect of a client that we help to support, for a long time, we saw that there were inconsistencies in their brand and what they were selling. And so in 2018, they went through a brand audit process with us. We were able to determine that they had a unique product within their mix. So typically it's, okay, we are X brand and we do X, Y, Z, and this is how we do it. By going through the audit process, we were able to identify that they had a product, and they were able to break out that product, name that product, and then really go to market with that product. Before they even launched the rebrand, they had 5 offers. They knew that they had something very special. So they waited, they grew. We launched the brand in 2021. And we're estimating that they were pretty much at 50 million when they put the rebrand into place. They grew another 5 million within 3 quarters, and then they sold for 121 million within that same year. So brand, definitely, that is a key example of how it drives value. So we talk about EBITDA. I spoke about this earlier, that the consistency can increase revenue by 23%. And these are some additional statistics that help to support that. And when you look at pricing power, customer acquisition, and customer retention, you're looking at, an increase of 5 to 10% in the pricing power, 30% in customer acquisition, and then 60% in that customer retention. So really solid percentages that back up how a strong brand increases your EBITDA overall. So the questions every founder should be answering, and I asked you to write down some of your answers to questions earlier. And so we try, what I test, we go with this one sentence brand test. What does your company actually do? And I encourage you to write that down. Is it memorable? Can somebody figure out really what you do in that short sentence? And if you can't, and test it on a friend, that means that you still need to hone your messaging and make it tighter. I welcome each of you to write that down, email it to me, tell me what industry you're in, and I can help you and give you recommendations on that. But these are the top 5 questions that you really want to ask. Who exactly do we serve? What problem do we solve? Why are we different? Why should anybody trust us? And what do we want to be known for? And that will help you hone, what does your company do? And last, I want to, these are the final key takeaways that I want you to walk away with is brand isn't just your logo. Brand creates trust. And we're hearing that trust word go all the way throughout this presentation. Trust accelerates growth. Your clear positioning attracts customers, and clear messaging attracts investors. So going back to our grow statement, what is that one change that you're going to make now? Write it down, put it in a calendar. Each week, go back to it and make sure that you're actually pushing through on that so that you get noticed, you raise your value, you organize your resources, and you win business and people. And so I encourage you all to raise questions and connect with me. We do have a monthly newsletter that's educational, that highlights new trends in brand and marketing strategies. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn and also via email. And I'm happy to collaborate with you as you go through this journey of developing your brands, increasing your EBITDA, and achieving your goals. So I open it up for questions. Kennedy, you're on mute.
Thank you for that. I hate that we all know that happens and you never.
Oh, it always happens.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that was super insightful. I know we've been active in the chat. I'll ask everyone to continue to log their questions, sending questions, contact Deborah for next week. But for a send-off question, I know Sharon had quite a specific one that would be great. So we only get demo days through founder-led sales and LinkedIn. We want to figure out a way to get through it using a strong landing page and get customers booking demos on their own. We're currently at 400 ARR, and we want to get a demo in 1 week. So I think the context, sorry, we lost the question, is addressing the goal this quarter, want to convert more demos via our website and landing page. Could you take us through some advice processes of what would be your approach?
So you're mentioning LinkedIn number one, and so this is where that research phase comes in of understanding is that number one where you should be. Really honing in on, all right, where is that target market, and are you reaching them with this initiative right now, and is the messaging the right way too? So if it is in place and you are getting that ROI, it could be increasing dollars and that pipeline and the connectivity of those 5, we're looking at those 5 to 7 touch points. Is it just LinkedIn? Should it be email? I also like to say too, as far as honing, look at associations as well. We forget about our associations. So if you're trying to go after the decision makers, look at where they typically are communicating and getting their information. So that might be another layer. But my advice is really look at, should you be going through LinkedIn right now? Are there other layers, and is the messaging correct in order to get them to convert?
I think that's great. Thank you for your insight. If you wanted to send off these founders with some homework to bring back some answers and questions next week, what would you like them to think about this week or maybe do?
Truly the two things are that sentence, what is your brand positioning? What is that elevator pitch that you can say in one sentence and somebody understands what you do? And then secondarily would be, what is the biggest pain point that you have right now, and how can research help you to understand how you can solve that? And that's typically by looking at your competition.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Deborah. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Look forward to chatting to you more next week.
Thank you for the opportunity. See you next week. Have a great weekend.